Good evening. Thank you for joining us here at your local television station, KZGN. This is Ridgecrest Talk, and I am ClairAnn Herbert. And today our very special guest is the Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Dave Ostash of Sierra Sands Unified School District.
Thank you, Claire.
Hello.
Really a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, we are very happy to have you. Now, today was the very first day of school.
It was indeed. It's probably the biggest day of the year for us.
Very, very, very good. Yes, it was kind of busy. I have 3 kids, and I saw it was a scramble for everyone. So I'm very curious what your background is with Sierra Sands,
right.
the district.
Thanks, Claire. This is my 20th year in the district, and I started as a teacher, an English teacher at Burroughs High School, and kind of from there just found myself stepping into one role after another, from teacher leader to swimming coach and senior class advisor, dean of students, assistant principal, and I was very fortunate that it brought me up into 2005 and transitioned to my first principalship at Monroe Middle School, which was really nice because then I got a different perspective, having been at the high school for about 10 years at that point.
So you went from high school to middle school?
To middle school, to kind of take advantage of that opportunity to get that first principalship. And 3 years later, in 2008, I then returned to Burroughs High School, where I had started in 1996, and began my principalship there in 2008. And so for the last 6 years, I've been at Burroughs High School as principal, which has been wonderful. And then quite a sea change occurred just in the last few months. We've hired over 60 new personnel, approximately 30 new teachers, and about 30 new support staff.
Are any of them from out of town, or is this
sure?
pretty local?
I literally just hired a teacher who's going to teach a kindergarten first grade combo at Inyokern, and she's coming in from Germany.
Oh, wow.
She's not a German national, but she's been in Germany the last 6 years with her husband with the Department of Defense. So he's coming in town. Her credentials are amazing. She's very experienced, and she's very excited to start with us.
That is a huge, huge move.
A few days before that, I hired a kindergarten teacher for Las Flores, who's coming from Tennessee. She's been in Tennessee the last 10 years, but would like to come back to the West Coast where she's from. Interestingly, she was born and raised in Orange County, but having spent the last 12 years in Knoxville, Tennessee, she told me, she said, you know, my parents still live in Orange County, but first, I couldn't afford it there, and second, I really wouldn't want to go back to the big city after having spent 12 years in a smaller town. And so if I could get back to California, be a lot closer to my parents, but also have more of the small town culture, the small town environment, and an opportunity to be in a public school district, that would be ideal. And the more she learned about us in Ridgecrest, the more she realized it was a perfect match. So yeah, to answer your question, we hire people locally, and we're just looking for people to fill spots who are highly qualified, who will enthusiastically serve us, do a great job for students. As you know, your kids are in the school, my kids are in the schools. I have a daughter at Las Flores School and a son at Monroe Middle School. And so we prefer local, but there are, obviously for teachers, there are certification requirements, credentialing, particular education requirements. So we can't always fill our teaching spots with locals. That's our first preference, that's our first go-to, and we have great local people. And in many cases, teachers will come back to us after having been brought up, raised in our district, go out, get their education, and come back. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, we lifted off school today with about, approximately 5,100 students, which is pretty even. I think we're maybe 17 or 20 students more than we were last year at this time, but pretty stable. We have had some declining enrollment the last few years. We're trending downward a little bit, and I attribute that to, well, we don't know exactly, but we know there are more options. For one, there's a charter school in town. There's a couple of different opportunity type programs.
Now, the charter is not affiliated with Sierra Sands, is it?
Charter is not affiliated with us. They're chartered through the state of California. Okay. There is a relationship there for some facilities and such, but no, they're their own charter. And And there are some private schools, and there are also some opportunity programs, and even some statewide and private enterprises that are online, hybrid programs, and some of our students in the Valley, I think, appreciate and take advantage of those some alternative opportunities. So we've seen a little bit of trend, but for the most part, we're pretty stable. Where we see the decline in enrollment really is in the secondary schools, and when I say secondary schools, I mean grades 6 through 12. And in the primary, we've seen kind of stable or increasing.
Do you feel that it has anything to do with the base and people moving through the government?
That's really hard to put our finger on the pulse of that. It kind of ebbs and flows. I think, we all are observant in our Valley, and we know when there seems to be, a hiring freeze on base, or if things slow down and they're slower to hire, or if we expand, and when we expand, obviously our district expands as well. But I think the base, I'm not an expert on it. You can interview a city official or something.
I feel like there is a piece of paper that we do fill out that I believe that has to do with that, and it also asks if you are with the government or civilian.
That's a really good question. In October, our district will be going through its annual emphasis of collecting that impact aid card. You're talking about the impact aid card.
Correct, yes.
There is, because our school district resides in a location where there's very little tax revenue. There's very little corporate tax revenue because, the base, as I understand it, is approximately 80% of our economic driver in this valley, and they don't pay tax. They're the federal government, and so you don't get this wash through of local revenues coming back like a lot of other municipalities do in California. So the federal government recognized years ago that was an impact on communities, around the nation where there are school districts that are serving installations, like ours. And so we qualify for some what's called federal impact aid, which is a federal provision through the Congress, and we get certain allotments per student based upon if they live on base, if they live with their folks on base, which we know is a small number now relative to the way it used to be back in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. And then we get a certain lesser amount for each student who may live in Ridgecrest, but whose parents work on the station.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that is very interesting. We're just about ready to go to commercial, so we'll be right back after this.
Okay, sounds good.
Be sure to come back. We'll be right back. Evening, we're back. This is Ridgecrest Talk. I am ClairAnn Herbert, and tonight our guest is Dave Ostash, the Assistant Superintendent of Sierra Sands Unified School District. We left off on the impact aid, and I was very quick to interrupt the first question that I had asked, which was, how did the first day go?
Well, actually, I have an answer for that. I can speak clearly to that. I think I recall saying initially there was a sea change, and that is, we have a new superintendent, Mr. Ernie Bell, who is not new to the Valley. Of course, he's born and raised, product of the district, and he's doing a fantastic job. He's a great leader, very well received. We had our all-hands meeting yesterday with all of our teachers and staff. We really kicked it off on a positive note. But we have 10 of 25 leadership positions in our district are new faces, including mine, because I was principal last year, and now I'm serving as the Human Resources Assistant Superintendent. I mentioned we have 60 new staff members, 30 of whom are instructional, 30 of whom are support. So we have new people all over the place. But we're a great team. We pulled off a great feat. I got to tell you, starting a first day of school in any school district is a total orchestra of so many different elements, and I'm talking food service, and we think of school, we think teachers and students. That's the first thing we think of. But
a lot more
I got to tell you the support that goes into the transportation department. We have a very comprehensive transportation department. We pick up students all over this valley, extending out to Johannesburg and Randsburg and all the way out to Inuakurn, and quite a wide swath of land. And our transportation department gets to work no later than 5 a.m. And in some cases, the last bus driver is pulling in the bus barn at 5 p.m. So we're talking about, transporting students from all over the valley, getting them into classes. We have students with special needs who have individual requirements.
It's a huge production.
It's a supervision issue. It is a huge production. Food, meal service, instructional materials. It's a huge feat. And really, honestly, truly, I'm biased, of course, because I represent our district, but truly, totally objectively, I think we do an amazing job of pulling everything together, putting everybody in place, and all of a sudden, by 7:30 or 8 in the morning, by the time most schools have started, some of our schools start at 9 a.m., but we have 5,000 students where they're supposed to be, with the appropriate teacher, and, very few to no tears. No kicking and screaming.
I have a hard enough time with my 3 sometimes.
Yeah.
That's overwhelming.
And by the time 2:30 comes, everybody, knowing where to be picked up and meeting mom and dad under that tree on the west side of the school or whatever the case may be. But I don't know if I've done a really good job of clearly describing the orchestration of events, but it is really complex. And we're a well-run district, and probably I should say more importantly, we have such buy-in. Our community, our parents, our businesses, our community leaders, everybody truly feels ownership. We're out here in this Indian Wells Valley. We're really self-reliant, and we take a lot of pride in what we do. We take care of each other. We live and work, in the same place, and we take a lot of care for each other. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, the first day went really, really well.
Very good. Very good. Now, do you feel that all of this coming together, does that have anything to do with that book that we talked about the other day?
Right. Thank you for asking that, Claire. One of the things we wanted to do as a leadership team is really infuse the right kind of angle or attitude and lead with our strengths. And all of a sudden, because we had this conversation, we got to lead with our strengths. We got to rely on everyone's strengths. And we came across a book that we ended up buying for our leadership team, and it's called Strengths-Based Leadership. It's written by Rath and Conchi, and it's a really extraordinary way of thinking. Traditionally, in the field of psychology, we really look at things kind of in a deficit model. So think in terms of, you go to the doctor or you go to see somebody who's there to help you. What's wrong? Well, this is wrong. So this is wrong. This is how we're going to fix it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but that's kind of that deficit model. Whereas in a learning environment, if we focus on strengths rather than, this child here can't read at grade level, let's say. So a lot of times we target that, and we target that kid, and we really raise a lot of attention. Not deliberately, but we raise a lot of attention to that. What can we do in our school system, not just ours, but across the nation, but we're focusing on ours. What can we do to focus on student strengths? How can teachers key in on that? How can they differentiate their assessments? How can they give students multiple modalities, different opportunities to show what they know? Here's a very mundane example. So let's say that we're teaching vocabulary words to a 9th grade English class, and there's 30 students in the class. And every single Friday, we might, quiz these students in the same manner. Now, I'm not suggesting we do that. There are many programs in our district that are really innovative, and I'm not going to get into those tonight because we don't have time for that. But in an old-fashioned model, we might just say, okay, you guys, here's your words on Monday, memorize them, and then you're going to have a written quiz on Friday, right? I remember that as a student. And
yes,
there are so many different ways. You can say, well, this Friday we're going to have an oral review. Be ready, I'll call on you, and if you can answer the question. There's so many different ways.
Mrs. Myers was like that. I remember in high school, she actually, because I was one that had a hard time just taking tests, and she noticed that, and she actually singled me out, and she said, I'm going to read the questions, and she actually physically showed me and was, so I did a lot better just because I'm a visual learner, so that's really good. I think that's extremely important.
Right. So I'm not discounting all the traditional ways of assessment. I think they're important, but how can we sort of hybridize? How can we make things multiple modalities? How can we take the time, be efficient, and plan such that we can kind of teach in different ways, But
well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying she's probably the only teacher that I ever had that did that.
Right.
Which I think
right.
is, I think that's really important. That would be neat to
right.
have.
And not only
teachers.
to maybe teach differently, but like we kind of, the emphasis assessing differently.
Okay,
because
yes.
a lot of times we assess in the same manner over and over again. And so those students for whom that mode of assessment works well, they do really well.
Mm-hmm.
And for students who maybe are great storytellers or have a great memory and can regurgitate things and demonstrate learning, but maybe have a hard time converting that to the written sentence, there's so many different ways that we can experience learning and
right.
assess learning. And so we're trying to lead with our strengths. And so at our all-hands meeting on Monday, we really shared that with the staff.
Really quick, hold that
yes.
thought. That is great. We're going to go to a
yes.
quick commercial break, and we're going to come right back to that. Please stay tuned. Come back. We got a quick commercial break, and we will continue on in just a moment.
Bones sinking like stones, all that we fall for.
Good evening, and we're back. Tonight, Ridgecrest Talk, I'm ClairAnn Herbert. We have Mr. Dave Ostash, the Assistant Superintendent of Sierra Sands Unified School District. And we left off on the book and talking about the
Strengths-based leadership.
Correct. Okay.
So what strengths-based leadership has done for us is really fueled our vision statement and kind of created a platform we can jump from. And although it's not been actually formally endorsed by our board yet, it's going next week. 2 weeks from now, I think, is our board meeting, and we expect it'll be approved. But we created a vision statement, and I have it in front of me. Growing a community of engaged learners connecting to future opportunities through innovative education. And so for those of you on the TV might be thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, we were really, really deliberate about the words we used. We talked about a community, and that's what we are, engaged learners. The old-fashioned process, and I'm not saying everything's bad with old-fashioned. I like some of the old-fashioned, but we just have to, adapt.
Right.
The traditional view of teaching was just that. It was a teaching process. And that's really not the 21st century of viewing it. It really is a learning process. It's not teacher-centric. The teacher teaches, the student should learn, the teacher teaches the lesson, the student learns the lesson, and it's kind of that one-way, expectation. Teacher
right.
up here, student down here. Really, it's become more of a community of engaged learners, and but the common core and the kind of the accountability model of state standards, it really has come to the point where teachers really need to view themselves. I view myself as a learner. I'm not a teacher. I'm a learner. And if I can engage my student learners to learn along with me, that's where I'm going to optimize my results. So we created this vision statement that we're all engaged learners. It's not a teacher-student process anymore. It's an engaged learning process. We want to connect them to future opportunities through innovative education. We recognize that if you go back 20 years ago, I should say if you go back 50 or 60 years ago, if you go back 20 years ago, what people expected from a high school education was different than what it is now. It's truly a global market. There is global competition, and what we teach and what we learn in our high schools now has to be different than what it was years ago. We're not insulated anymore. We're not protected by our borders.
I think it's a little different too, even with what society has turned, I don't know how to put this in exact words, but how some parents, and I'm not singling anybody out, but how, I don't know, kids don't take responsibility. So it's really hard, I think, for teaching when they go home, and a lot of things are undone. I don't know if I've seen it myself. So I think, yeah, the learning process has to be different.
Right.
It's a little discipline.
Time is precious, and being able to engage somebody is different now. If you go back before the technological incline where, people didn't have technology in their minute-by-minute lives, engaging people was much more simple. You could put a book in front of somebody's face, or you could listen to a radio station and really be engaged. And nowadays, the digital natives, you know, those were the youngest generation. We're not talking Gen X. We're not even talking about Gen Y. We're talking about the digital natives, the ones who have been born now, maybe back to like 2001. These people are not engaged by simplicity. They've got iPhones and Androids and music.
They're teaching a lot of the older folks,
you know,
the
and
technology.
they're constantly being barraged by this stimulation. And so this concept, even this right here, of you and I talking, you know,
Right,
this is a more linear kind of conversation. So in order to engage our learners, it's much more challenging. So we need to, and so that kind of finishes up with this conversation, is we need to have innovative education. We need to have education that's relevant. We need to have some career and technical education, whether it be digital electronics, which we have at Burroughs High School, or restaurant careers. There's a, you know, the culinary industry is alive and well. We have,
they have that
we have
at
TV, video. Yeah, we have restaurant careers. We have TV
wow.
and video production. We have civil engineering and architecture. We have principles of engineering.
That is fantastic. Yes, I've actually seen some posts where I don't have a high school student right now, but I have seen some posts on people, you know, saying, oh, we don't have a lot of these things, but that's good to know. It's very good to know.
And we still teach all the traditional, the literature and the mathematics, and that's of course critically important, but we really need to be able to offer students those actual applicable skills that will translate into a rewarding career, you know, whether it be economically rewarding and also just fulfilling. So we really feel strongly about that. And you know, I don't know how much time I have left, but our slogan this year, and I want to get that out there, is engaging all learners. We recognize that there's an element of marketing in everything we do now, even in public service. Everything is more competitive now. You know, you don't have to go to Sierra Sands Unified School District if you live in the Indian Wells Valley. There are other options now that didn't exist 20 years ago. 10 years ago, certainly 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we recognize that. So we believe that we need to engage all learners. We believe that we need to provide the greatest value proposition. We need to be adaptable. We need to be relevant. We need to make sure that our programs are excellent and that people will profit from it.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Well, we're getting ready to wrap up, and I thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was great. And Ridgecrest, I hope everybody is tuning in. So please make sure that you tune in tomorrow for the news at 5:30, and also Ridgecrest Talk at 6 o'clock. And this goes on Monday through Friday. And it is also viewed on YouTube. So be sure to tune into that. And thank you so much. This is going to be a great year.
Thank you to KZGN. Thanks, Tom Wishnick,
and
the
please,
owner.
we would definitely like to have you back and keep us posted on anything that we can do to let the community know.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone out there. Hi, Ridgecrest.
Absolutely. And have a good night. Thank you for joining us here at Ridgecrest Talk.
Thank you, Claire.
Yes, thank you.